munitions are full up, and our will is ironclad, which means our timeline is ours and ours alone to control. As long as it takes to ensure the United States of America achieves these objectives. And as we flow more forces, and as we flow more capabilities, and as our munitions, as we're flying over the top, have even more devastating effects, we set the tempo, we set the timeline, led by the commander on the ground.
That was Secretary Hegseth offering an update this afternoon, not putting a timeline on the war in Iran, after he said yesterday it could potentially go on as long as 8 weeks. That's the longest timeline we've heard so far. Perspective now from David Frum, who's a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush and staff writer for The Atlantic. I think a lot of people are looking at this and trying to pay attention to these updates every single day. Where are you at in terms of what you're hearing from the administration so far?
You've been telling tonight two stories, one about the war in the Middle East and one about DHS at home. And it's very important to understand these are in fact one story. The United States is now engaged in a big global war against the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. There is, of course, a real risk that that state sponsor of terrorism could do terrorism inside the United States. And an even bigger risk that the administration could claim that there are acts of terrorism coming. It has never been more vital to have professional, responsible, competent, honest, trustworthy leadership of the Department of Homeland Security that is committed to respecting the freedom of Americans and not in any way allowing that department to be used to tamper with the 2026 elections. But that's not the leadership it's had, and that's not the leadership that the president would like it to have.
So what is your concern about, do you have concerns about Markwayne Mullin specifically, or just in terms of how they plan to use the Department of Homeland Security?
People close to the president are circulating plans to use emergency powers to in some way shut down free and fair elections in 2026 because they know that the president's party will lose badly.
Yeah, and Trump said he didn't know about that.
He didn't know about that, of course. Well, he says a lot of things. But he has himself in 2020 tried to do it. So this is a real risk. In time of war, the president's powers grow. In time of war against a terrorist state, of course the DHS's powers must grow. We all understand that. The idea that they would have this kind of person anywhere near the repressive apparatus of the American state at this time, you're going to hear a lot of concerns about terrorism, and some of them may be valid. You need to have those concerns filtered through the expertise of competent, professional, trustworthy, honest people who respect rights and are going to protect elections, not try to tamper with them.
What do you make of, I mean, one thing that stood out to me is I've covered a lot of Trump's firings. He's giving Noem, though, until the end of the month. Presumably, it might take a little bit for Mullin, Senator Mullin, if he's confirmed, to get confirmed. I mean, that is a gap in leadership of overseeing the department.
Look, the Noem's story is such a scandal, and it goes to questions of financial integrity, and it goes to the rule in Trump world that President Trump can help himself to everything that isn't nailed down, but don't let his supporters do it unless they kick up to the boss. But financial irregularity, financial scandals, that's not unique in this administration. But what is unique is the officials who are in charge of protecting the United States against terrorism by the world's leading state sponsor of terror, with whom the United States is now in global war. You need to have somebody professional there and not bozos.
You mentioned the midterms. One thing that the White House really felt like they had going for them was gas prices were down significantly. It hasn't been a week since this war started, and they've increased 26 cents on the gallon. They're at their highest level in 11 months. Yeah. The president says they could come down quickly. That might be true, but I wonder what you think of if that's should be on the concern radar for the White House.
I have enough respect for the political competence of this White House to believe that they don't believe that. That is to know, they knew if the elections were free and fair in 26, they were heading for disaster. And that their concern was not gas prices. Their concern was finding a way to tamper with the elections. That's always been priority one. President Trump, at the very beginning of this administration, said he wanted to put authority over elections into the president's personal hands. Now, that fell apart in the courts, mercifully, but he knew from the beginning the only way he could keep his majorities in Congress was by cheating, not by gas prices doing this or that. Every price is up. Electricity prices, food prices. It's an inflationary disaster made worse by the tariffs.
Well, we'll see. Obviously, they're concerned, certainly about the political aspect of the midterms.